reeling from some pretty serious COVID-19 right now. Both of our countries have pretty low vaccination rates. Does it look like that's going to change in the next couple of months? Is it a good idea to reopen the bubble?
Well, I just think the government has to be careful about this because obviously they don't provide us with the information that they've got. We get most of our information on this either from questions that we ask the government or from the media. So they need to be very careful because of this Delta variant. And what's clear is that if it gets into the community, it spreads quite quickly. I think we've been quite lucky in New Zealand, obviously with this current case, and whether that's got anything to do with apparently the person who had it did have one dose of vaccination. That might have helped, but we just got to get the vaccines rolled out, and that's really important.
So basically, you can't have a view right now because you don't have the same advice that they do on the transmission bubble.
They don't share the information at all. They keep it to themselves. So, for instance, if it's things like even the vaccine rollout, which we have to have, we don't know, even though we ask questions about what's the hold-up other than supply. And so that's, I think, is the crucial thing for the government, is to get the rollout done.
On the vaccine rollout, currently we've got a supply issue, obviously, and the supply issue is that the one vaccine that we're using, Pfizer, we're not getting more until kind of late July. Would you be pushing to use the other vaccines that we've actually paid for or pre-purchased, things like Johnson that other countries are using that MedSafe have somewhere near approval? Everyone else has approved them. It seems unlikely we're going to not approve them. Would you be pushing to use a wider suite of vaccines in order to get the country fully vaccinated quicker?
Well, it's a possibility, but I really do. I mean, I can't sort of make that decision without having the advice from, obviously, the Ministry of Health, but also the government. If it shared the advice, I could give you a considered answer, but they haven't shared that advice. So I think that's one of the problems. They need to just trust New Zealanders a bit more and share the advice that they're getting.
But there's a lot, if you look around the world, AstraZeneca and Janssen aren't being used by other countries, right? Is there any reason we shouldn't be using them?
Well, I think there've been some questions about some of those vaccines. People have been told that the Pfizer vaccine is the preferred option in New Zealand. People are wanting to have the Pfizer vaccine, and if we don't get about 80% of the coverage for New Zealanders immunised, we're going to have further problems, I would have thought, with lockdowns.
Chris Finlayson, long-time colleague of yours, veteran member of the National Party, not some Johnny come lately. He told one of our reporters yesterday he's never seen brand destruction like what is going on with the National Party right now, but he has no sympathy for you guys, and the National Party deserves everything that has come into it right now. Does that hurt?
No, not particularly. I mean, Chris is, I think, he's somebody who left 2 leaders back. I think he was disappointed at leaving, but he's making a new career. And look, I always think that it's been tough. We've had to deal with people like the Jake Presents and the Andrew Falloons and another few other issues. You've just got to deal with these things. And, as I say to people, just put your big girl pants on and get out there and do the job. Much
of his criticism was saved not for you, but for the executive, for the the outside of Parliament party. You don't choose the board, the members do, but you're obviously a member in pretty good standing. A lot of members would pay a lot of attention to what you say. Do you rate the leadership and the choices they've made over the last couple of years? Not the parliamentary leadership, the party-wide leadership?
Well, I think the board itself has seen that they've had some issues as well. We've seen that last year. We understand that. And that was one of the reasons that the party and the board itself decided to have a review of really what's happened in the last 3 years and how to move forward so that we don't make the same mistakes around particularly selections. And I think that's one of the issues that Chris Finlayson raised, and I would utterly agree on the selection issue. So we're revamping the Candidates College, we're looking at the way we actually interview people, how we look for character and for basically stickability as well. So these are all issues that have been raised in the review that the board asked for, and they are being implemented. So we've got a special general meeting coming up now, having to be part of our AGM in August. It was going to be last weekend, but of course we had the level 2 lockdown rating, I should say, in Wellington, so that had to be postponed. And so, we have to follow our rules as well. So that's what's happening.
And Peter Goodfellow's position in that job, is that tenable going forward?
Well, of
He's
course,
been there
I mean,
long time.
Peter's position is, as president, is voted on by the board. And of course, it's voted on again after the AGM. So, he's doing, he's been doing a very good job. It's a tough job. I say to people, whoever is the president will always have my support.
Let's talk about the last week or so. How frustrated were you personally that the details of Muller's exit from Caucus, from Parliament, leaked out to the media?
Well, I'm not worrying about matters in Caucus. Obviously, the Caucus issues are always held in Caucus, and that's not something I ever discuss. But I'm very satisfied with the fact that the Caucus is working hard, holding the government to account, and that's what I'm here to talk about.
What's the new line for MPs leaking? Are they able to criticise decisions by you or the party if they put their name to it, if they're open about their criticisms?
Well, I think it's really important that New Zealanders, and certainly the National Party members and volunteers and voters, want us to focus on holding the government to account. We have good discussions in Caucus, and that's exactly where those discussions should stay. It's like being on a board of a company or even of a party. It's really important that any discussions or, let's say, disagreements are held in those rooms, because otherwise it's actually very counterproductive. No public company would put up with people talking against their own party or their own business. And it's really important that Caucus stays exactly focused on the job.
Typically, people leak from organisations when they feel like they aren't able to make their voices heard within the organisation itself. Do you think there are people in your party, MPs, who are kind of uncomfortable with the party's direction but are unable to get that view across in Caucus?
Well, the thing is, with a democracy, which the National Party also operates in our Caucus, is not everybody always gets exactly what they want. But part of being an adult and being part of a team is that sometimes you just have to go with the majority on things, and that's the way it works. So, there's plenty of times when, people in any organisation don't get exactly what they want. Well, that's because, that organisation's decided on something else.
You've spoken about the group Speak Up for Women being barred from using various venues. Is this, for you, is this a pure free speech issue? I don't really care what you're saying, you should be able to say it wherever you want kind of issue? Or do you feel some personal support for the issues that they're pushing?
Well, I'm going to be very frank about this. When we've got councils and government bodies that are funded by either government or ratepayers, that they have, in my opinion, an obligation to allow people to have free speech. A free speech that does not incite violence and is not of that ilk should be able to be accommodated. Particularly we're talking about libraries, which are all about sharing information and having discussion and ideas. I'm a lawyer. I was 20 years a lawyer before coming into a place with a debating chamber. I've been a debater. You've got to be able to have people having different views without being shouted down or cancelled out. So it is really important. Free speech is, to me, actually one of the hallmarks of a liberal democracy, and you cannot have a liberal democracy without free speech.
But to be clear, is it a free speech issue for you purely?
Well,
or do you also have some support for the group?
It's a free speech issue for me, and I support people being able to have their say. Not this particular group necessarily over any other group, but everybody should be able to book venues and not have them cancelled out by a council person who's decided that they're above the law.
Does the National Party have a view on the government's move to allow people to self-identify their gender on their birth certificate? You can already do this on your passport and your driver's licence.
So that is a matter that Caucus is still to consider. So that is something that we'll state once we've got that decision made.
Do you have a personal view?
My personal views are the Caucus views. When you're in politics, in a party, you have your personal views are the Caucus views, unless it's a conscience issue, in which case then we'll let you know.
I mean, the risk on it said there's basically no risk because there's no evidence of anyone using their driver's license or passport to do anything out, do anything untoward with their new gender, and it's not like people take their birth certificates to gender-only spaces. I don't think anyone really carries the birth certificate around. So
No, I
do
don't
you really
anyway.
see any risk there?
Well, that's always a matter for caucus, and that's the point, isn't it? Is these discussions are made in caucus, decisions are made in caucus, and unless we have a conscience vote, then it's always a caucus decision. And whether or not everybody agrees when we go into that caucus, everyone needs to agree as we come out, including, by the way, me.
Just finally, sorry, I know this is a long one. Mental health. Government's had a huge issue actually getting the money out the door. You can quibble about where the money's going, but it's clearly not quite leaving the government coffers. You would criticise Labor for being tax and spend. Currently, they're kind of just tax on this.
Yeah.
Is there a problem with how money is actually spent? Because the defence and Little has basically pointing to you guys and saying they had trouble spending as well. So as there is an issue here where money allocated by governments aren't getting on the ground from the Ministry of Health.
It's really important if a government says and a Prime Minister says we're allocating $1.9 billion for mental health in our budget in 2019, which is what's happened, that you actually have an idea how you're actually going to allocate that and then spend it. And obviously people, New Zealanders expect the government to do what they said they're going to do. And did they not have an idea about what they want to do with it and how they'd do it when they just made that great big fat promise? When they promised and they allocated $1.9 billion for mental health 2 years ago, I thought we should have done that. I wish we'd done that.
So you thought the National Party should have moved earlier on that?
Obviously, I thought we should have done that. We should have done more. I wish it was us doing that. Why? Because it's a serious issue, and we know that people can't get into hospital beds, suicidal people on floors and mental health units. We know all of that. And so we thought the government had the plan that they said they had. Turns out their plan was as useless as their vaccine rollout.
Simon Bridges was saying in a review actually of Michael Collins' book recently that he thought the kind of problem of the last term or so for National was that it kind of got stuck in its own ways and did it admit that there needed to be more social spending, much like Cullen did admit there needed to be tax cuts. Take you all the way back. Are you kind of in agreement with Simon a little bit? Maybe in the last term there could have been a bit more loosening.
I think one of the problems is for a government in its third term is actually trying to think of and do new things without actually saying, oh, well, there's a reason we didn't do it before. You see it in governments generally. They become so stuck in what they've agreed to that they don't want to resile from any of that. And that's one of the problems the Prime Minister's finding herself with her hate speech legislation. She should have actually thought about it before she promised it.
Thank you so much for your time, Judith.